You guys hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, those pictures were amazing last night. I saw something on social media. There were some guys like jumping into the Milwaukee River.
Oh dear.
Yeah, exactly. Right
Well,
by
that's
Pier
funny.
Marquette.
Oh dear.
Oh dear, yes.
Yeah, I saw there was a list of like the top 10 cities or largest cities in Wisconsin, and Deer District was number 10 because of the population that was down there, the number of people.
That's good.
Yeah.
60,000 people. That was insane.
Nuts.
How many people do we have here?
A couple more coming in.
Well, we'll give another minute and then we'll start. Claire, I like your picture.
Thank you. Oh, wait.
Okay, shall we get started? My name is John Stiebel. I am the chair of the COC, representing the city of West Allis. Even though I'm retired from the city, the mayor asked me to continue. Let's start off with the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Guatli, so move. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Is there a second?
Morning, everyone. This is Amy. I can second that.
Any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, all in favor certify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Meeting schedule. We're going to try and stay on the schedule if we can. A couple of housekeeping issues. How comfortable are people with meeting in person?
I'm okay with it. Now that I'm fully vaccinated.
Yes, good morning. I would be fine with beginning to schedule in-person meetings and starting to make our way back to that.
Very good.
Same here.
Anybody uncomfortable? If not, until otherwise notified, we'll anticipate having our next meeting in person. Raphael, will we be back to our regular meeting place?
Well, I guess we can figure that out. Maybe we can find a space big enough to host it. Maybe not in our typical place we would have. Because in the past we've met at the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, but we're not going to be meeting there. But if anyone else has any ideas of space that would hold, between 20 and 30 individuals in September, please reach out to Claire and I with any suggestions. But in the meantime, we can also on our end look for a spot.
Very good. So September 16th will be our next regularly scheduled meeting. With the NOFA coming out in the next couple of weeks, we may need to have a meeting before then, but we will advise the board about that.
Mm-hmm. And then John, just to say that we, at our next meeting, we meet in person, we can still offer, put something in the chat, offer the option for folks to join us virtually, so we can figure that out as we move forward.
I'm sure we could accommodate that.
Mhm.
Let's go to the item number 4, the COC marketing with K Communication. Catherine, or I see Todd we have on here.
Hello.
It's just
Yeah.
started the last 3-4 months, and give a little summary if you would, Todd.
Yeah, you bet. Well, Todd and I will jump in and I will share my screen. I have a quick presentation. I will first address the elephant in the room that I am wearing a Brewer shirt because it just happens to be that our staff is going on a team outing today. So yes, I am well aware that the Bucks won last night, but this is why I'm wearing a Buck shirt. So, sorry, Brewer shirt. Just wanted to call that out. All right. So I will start sharing my screen. Thank you for sharing those privileges, Claire. Awesome. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So I'll do the quick agenda here, and then we'll also give some introductions of who Todd and I are and our roles for the project. We'll run through our scope of work and timing. We'll talk through some of the audit findings that we've had over the last few months. And then at the end of our presentation, we'll leave room for Q&A. So just quick update on that. So without further ado, there we go. I actually recognize many of the faces on this call, but for those who I don't know, hi Amy, I see your smile. You're just on my call. I'm Catherine Foley. I'm an account supervisor, and I was the main point of contact for Raphael. And my background is in public relations and media relations. So for the communications audit, that's an area where I helped focus, as well as then manage the other work of our team members, and then sharing that out with Raphael and really overseeing our contract. And Todd?
And my name is Todd Nilsson. Good morning to everybody. It's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. My role with K Communications is a senior advisor for digital strategy work. So I'm the guy that digs into all the websites, looks at your social media, thinks about ways to build your brand online. Not so much to advertise or sell stuff, but I'm interested in connecting with people. And the work that I do is really specialized in community building. So I love working on projects like this. Nice to meet you all.
All right, so I'll just jump in and give you an overview of what we were engaged to do, and then throughout the presentation, you'll hear more about that. But we broke our work down into 2 different phases. The first being a communications and digital audit. So that means we rolled up our sleeves and looked at what the COC has, what currently exists, from the website to the social channels, newsletter, and just existing communications materials, as well as we identified 3 best-in-class national COC organizations, and the COC staff, as well as stakeholders, many on this call, helped identify those 3 best-in-class national organizations. And we evaluated their communications practices and looked for opportunities that we could do here locally. The second phase of our work is what we'll be entering in now, is really brand and naming. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. And just kind of added value in June in talking with the communications, COC Communications Committee. We felt there was a great opportunity to really highlight the point in time survey results as they were at a record low. So in June, we released that survey with the help of many people on this call, reviewing the content, providing the statistics, and really participating in media interviews. So again, I'll share a little bit more about the progress on that, but just something to call out is some of the work that we've helped support thus far. All right, so just giving kind of a general context of when we started this work, we really kicked off in March. In April, we did a lot of behind the scenes discovery interviews, getting to know the COC staff and stakeholders. And then with this core group of the COC Communications Committee, again, many of those who were on this call, we did a messaging workshop, which was a digital whiteboarding exercise led by Todd, talking through the voice of the COC, how the COC wants to be perceived, what are communications opportunities, who are our target audiences, and what is the desired result from those target audiences. So we took all of that preliminary research, Then did more secondary research, evaluating some of those COC best-in-class organizations and diving in to the digital audit, looking at the website analytics, newsletter analytics, and really gleaning some insights and opportunities for the organization. In June, as I had noted, we released the point in time survey results, and we did some PR around that. And then really worked to finalize that findings report. Some of those findings we'll share in the presentation today. Then for July and moving into August is really when we began the brand and name communications, working with Raphael to really identify what the best approach would be. And then in August is when we will distribute that brand and name survey. Again, I will provide more details later on. Any quick questions or thoughts thus far?
Keep on moving.
Let's keep moving. All right, so now we'll talk about the audit goals and progress.
So there were a couple of different goals that were identified, three that are here on the screen. First of all, we wanted to be able to identify and understand what the communications priorities were, and then any gaps that there may be for us to fill in by having conversations with the stakeholders and understanding what's there. Number two, to recommend opportunities or ideas used by similar successful organizations. As Catherine alluded to, we benchmark a couple of other national COCs, as well as looked at some local influencers that you had identified for us. And then third, finally, we outlined some short and long-term communication strategies and tactics that the COC can implement. We recognize it's important that we can not only help you with the long-term strategy, but that we're helping you with some of the immediate things to straighten out some of your communications priorities. So that was how we proceeded. And then the activities really took these forms. So Kane was engaged to perform the audit of the COC's existing communications channels. As part of this audit, our team spoke with COC staff members, partner agencies, and some key philanthropic partners to discuss the COC's current communication style and communications opportunities that exist for the organization. As part of the digital landscape audit, we evaluated 3 best-in-class continuums of care, continua of care, including Dallas, Nevada, and Chicago. We also reviewed similar local organizations and their social media efforts. For example, Street Angels, I think, was one that was brought up to us that we spent some time looking at. And we conducted a content audit comprehensively of the COC website to identify how to improve the usability and navigation and look and feel of the site. So next, I'd like to share some of our findings and some additional context about how the digital landscape audit was performed. So,
Todd, I added just a quick highlight before we dive into the digital findings, just a quick overview, and then we'll get into some of those key findings. But just to give context of, as we dived in, here are the top 3 communications findings we have, and then Todd will really get into that second portion about the website. The key findings we had in really doing the discovery interviews, talking with stakeholders, doing the digital audit, and then just speaking with different stakeholders in our communications committee, we learned that really only a small niche group of people know who the COC is and what types of services the organization provides. That recommendation really being to develop a brand platform and new organization name, something we'll again dive into a little bit later. 2, that the COC website is challenging to find and navigate once people are on the website. That recommendation is to rebuild the site for improved navigation, content organization, and updated visual imagery. Some of this which Todd will cover off on next. And then that third top line communications finding is really that stakeholders see an opportunity for the COC to take control of its own story and be more proactive about sharing content and resources. So that recommendation will be really consistently pitching media with success stories and seasonal story updates. We saw a great demand and interest in those point in time numbers and just interest in what the COC and its partner organizations are doing. And so just consistently working with media to make sure that the COC's voice is in those stories will really be key moving forward.
Great.
All right.
So first of all, I'll apologize that this is a bit of an eye chart to take a look at. Rest assured, I will walk you through some of these ideas, but we use a variety of tools to take a look at how a website is performing. And those include things like Google Analytics, which you might expect if you do any work with websites. It gives us an awful lot of information to know what's working and what's not with the way that a site is set up. We also use tools that evaluate how optimized the website is for search engines like Google. We look at things like social media. There are listening tools that we use that can evaluate how an organization is doing with its social media outreach or other kinds of online mentions. So on this slide and the next couple, and again, we'll keep it brief, this data is representative of the background research that we performed for the audit. And our approach here is not merely to collect data and pretty charts, but to interpret it so that we can proceed with evidence-based insight that suggests very specific, concrete kinds of actions. So, for example, some of the questions raised by data on this slide, really kind of starting with that website analytics section at the top, is that how much traffic does the website get? So you can see the past 2 years being compared in that very top website analytics box that's up there. Others include, what are the geographic sources of traffic to the website? In other words, where are people searching from? Where are they sitting when they're searching for you? What online media sources are driving traffic to the website? Well, we know it's primarily Facebook because that's the only channel you guys are actively using. And also, what are the website's top landing pages and how accessible is the site to persons with disabilities? So insights from these kinds of questions have included things like, with the exception of a relatively few minor spikes in traffic, the website really isn't getting that many monthly visitors, and those numbers aren't growing significantly year over year. So that might be something we want to do something about. Most of the traffic comes from the Milwaukee market, unsurprisingly, and from Facebook, also not a big surprise there. So no great insights came out of that. The home page is getting probably way too much landing page traffic, and we'll get into a detail slide for that. That's the only example we'll go into further detail about. And then finally, there are a few significant accessibility issues that could impact a person with disabilities trying to use the website. So some of the actions that are suggested by this data might include some things like formulating a site visitor growth strategy by defining an approach to more highly visible marketing content, or building a more conscious set of landing pages for stakeholders. So actually, why don't we go into that one in a little more detail on the next slide. So this is just a blow up of a slide that shows landing pages, and by that I mean where people go to from finding a Google result to actually entering your website. And in a lot of cases, for many websites, and this isn't a great thing, it's the homepage of the site, and that's actually the case for the Milwaukee COC website. However, that's not ideal. What we want is instead to have some other logical places where people enter the website based on what their needs are. And so that means defining, as Catherine alluded to earlier, some of the audiences that you want to reach, getting a wider audience, understanding the specifics of what kind of information they may be looking for, so you can serve it to them on a tailored landing page experience. And so that's really one of the things I'm looking at, and that's one of the insights that came out of this particular graphic. Something else you can kind of see on this is over on the right-hand side, that right-hand column, it says something bounce rate. And if you look down the right-hand side, those are pretty high percentages. That's not a great thing. So anything above a 35% bounce rate, which means somebody came to the site and then they left without doing anything on it, is not a great situation. You want people to be interacting with information on the site. So that's telling me, the insight that I get from that is there's maybe not a lot of interactivity built into the site. You're maybe not asking enough calls to action on the site, like signing up for a newsletter or becoming a member or getting involved or volunteering or donating in some way. And so we may need to look at some ways to rethink that in the website experience. And then finally, we did look more closely at some of the other COCs that are out there. We thought this one was particularly interesting for its use of photography to really paint a picture or an impression of homelessness as a topic. Very effective use of headlines. I like that. We will end homelessness. And again, this is not us saying you should definitely do exactly what Denver's doing, but that this may inform some of the ways that you choose to communicate through photography, through headlines. And that all comes from working with Catherine and the Kane team to put together that brand platform strategy. And so very much the theoretical discussions we have about, like, what is the identity? What is the brand platform? What are the brand messages for the Milwaukee Continuum of Care? Those all end up being expressed through things like the website and your social media platforms and things that you do.
All right, so that was just a quick snapshot of some of the findings we had from the communications audit. Again, it was several months of doing a lot of behind the scenes research and speaking with individuals, rolling up our sleeves, getting in the back end of the websites. And then we'll move into kind of our top level recommendations. There is a large communications audit, so that will be delivered to Raphael and team. So if anyone on the call wants to dive into any of this deeper, certainly, but we didn't feel you guys wanted to review 35 pages worth of findings, so we'll spare you. All right, so high level recommendations. Top 7 are develop that brand platform, which again is something we're moving forward doing, developing the brand platform and a new name for the organization that better represents the COC. Proactively pitching media stories. Again, we heard there was that great interest for a point in time. We've seen a lot of great success around that. And there's a lot of other great stories to tell, whether they're seasonal or just stories about the work that the COC and its partner agencies are doing. Building a new website that is user-friendly and reflects that modern design aesthetic, exactly what Todd just talked through. Enhancing COC's social footprint. Claire's doing a phenomenal job with the Facebook page. There's some recommendations on how maybe we could even elevate that a little bit more. And then depending on the audiences we really define as our target audiences, maybe looking at other social platforms we could tap into. Creating a public and stakeholder content calendar, just so we know, have a more consistent and systematic picture, long-term picture of the communications we're sharing out. And that can include other communications from partner agencies. Develop a crisis communications plan. As we know, certainly crises arise throughout the year, just making sure we've got something documented of what's the process, what are just having templates for holding statements, press releases, and just making sure there's a checklist of who needs to be involved in some of those crisis situations. And then developing a donor engagement and communication strategy. As we see, there's an opportunity to really tap into our local philanthropic partners and really building a strategy on how to engage them and how to sustain that engagement. So now that's phase 1, which has now been completed. We'll move into phase 2 of our work, which is that brand and name project. So what is a brand? Your brand is your reputation. Your reputation isn't what you say it is, but it's what they say it is. So when we think about brand, consistency, understanding, and beliefs are key, and really defining who your organization is and making sure that that key circle and those stakeholders know who your brand is and how to best represent it. It's kind of that North Star, that gut check of if you're going to do something when you're engaging or communicating about something, does this best represent our organization? So establishing the COC's reputation starts with defining your brand. A brand platform, just giving some context because I know these words are very jargony for probably many people on this call. So what is a brand platform? It's a living internal facing document that establishes a foundation for your organization's identity, messaging, and visual presentation. So it's that guide that your organization uses to ensure consistent experience and messaging. And it impacts the way you sound and look. Again, making sure no matter who's the spokesperson for the organization, everyone is saying the same mission for the COC, is using the same words to define the organization, is even referencing the organization the same. I'm sure all of us have that situation where maybe we reference our organization through an acronym or using the full name or abbreviated names that, just making sure that we are all saying that organization name and really representing the tone consistently. And that will really help the audience understand who we are. As Todd was saying, that brand, just in that Nevada example, that brand will really define our look and feel. And the brand helps us build off of everything. So the marketing piece of things, the brand identity, the overall brand experience, how people will engage with the organization and the experience that we want them to have. It will also help with public relations, our key messages, making sure we're consistent, making sure we're referencing the organization the same. And certainly that digital web look and feel will all have that consistency across the board and be able to be utilized in, one-page giveaways. So that, if you're engaging with a new stakeholder or someone learning about the organization, we have that same look and feel and that consistent messaging represented throughout, whether it's the website, the handout, key messages, again, that consistent piece reinforcing who we are. So what we will deliver in this next phase of work, we will have a virtual survey. This is something we worked with Raphael and team on. Given people's work situations being different and we want to engage a wide group of stakeholders, we determined that a virtual survey would be best for this brand and name research. So we will be distributing that survey to gather input on the COC brand and name. We will use some supplemental discovery interviews, whether that be phone or in-person interviews as needed to get maybe a few clarifying details or really dive into pieces like voice and feel. And that really is helpful to have that verbal communication as opposed to the virtual survey. Then we'll develop that brand platform like we talked about. That's that internal document, kind of your internal Bible or the choir book that everyone's going to be singing from, that really gives the elevator speech of who you are and what your organization does. And ultimately, we'll deliver 3 to 5 new name options, which the COC team can determine whether they will decide internally and or if that you want to go out to a vote perhaps to really decide then what's the ultimate new name for the organization. Again, that new name will be based on all of the feedback you guys give about the organization, the services it provides, and how you feel the organization should be represented so that the community understands the work. And then just as I noted throughout, point in time, I wanted to make sure that made its way in here. So we distributed the point in time survey, or rather release, on June 8th, and we had some really great results. First noting the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Jim, I saw you were on the call. We worked with the county, Impact, several of the other members of the communications committee on this Milwaukee Journal Sentinel story. That actually just was published only a few weeks ago. It was a long interview, and then Allison Durr, the reporter, went out with Eric and did a ride along. And this was a really great story where they got the point in time survey results, but also understood the holistic picture of what the COC and all of its partner organizations do and are doing and how they're taking a housing first approach. So this was a really great article that stemmed from our point in time release. There was a great TMJ4 interview Jim and Eric did. The Spanish Journal published the release in the paper. Madison 365 did an interview, Lake Effect, WUWM, and then just most recently, Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service reached out with an interest for an interview. There is still media interview, or rather interest. Several broadcast stations are still interested, but when we started pitching, it was right as the Bucks were entering into the playoffs and doing wonderful. So a lot of our reporters were like, yeah, we're interested, but can you just put a pin in it? So now we'll put in a pin in it for maybe a few more weeks as they continue to dominate the news cycle, as they should. But all this to say, there is a lot of interest, and we hope to see some additional stories even in the weeks and months to come. But just a quick overview of the work we've done thus far from a public relations standpoint. And then finally, what's next? And then we'll move into Q&A. So just from a timeline perspective, in August, we'll work on distributing that survey, that virtual survey, again, to this group, as well as a few other stakeholder groups that are deeply involved with the COC. We'll do the supplemental interviews, develop the brand platform and those name options. And then in September, we'll work to finalize a brand platform and really solidify what the new name of the organization will be. And then just to be aware, there's a discussion about that continued public relations support. And certainly there are some pressing and more evergreen topics, including the eviction moratorium and housing and landlord resources. Many media were interested in that ride-along opportunity, but obviously we want to be mindful and sensitive about that. And that's something we would work with Eric and other partner agencies on how to best coordinate those opportunities, but just keeping that in mind to give people context of the work we are doing. Creating more awareness about the housing first approach, and then just efforts around racial equity. So just wanted to put that bug in people's ear that these are things we're all aware of and talking with the COC about. And those are kind of the next steps you'll be seeing from us. So that's the quick presentation, maybe not so quick. That's the presentation. Are there any questions, thoughts, or feedback from anyone?
This is a very comprehensive process that you're going through. It looks quite good.
Thank you, John. Yeah, it's really important. I know sometimes research can be hard because there's so much that happens behind the scenes. It can feel like, well, you want to see the movement, but really this research allowed us to dive in deep and really understand the organization and get a feel for what other organizations are doing to deliver those best results. And yes, Raphael, we absolutely can send a copy of the presentation to everyone on the call.
Already sent Catherine. I shared it with Raphael. So.
Wow, magic. Thanks, Todd.
Yep.
Any other thoughts, questions, or commentary about last night's game, whatever?
That was a comprehensive explanation. Thank you, Catherine.
All right. Well, thank you, John. If any of you guys have questions that you think of later or just want to dive into anything deeper, of course, work with Raphael, reach out to us. Happy to answer any questions, get on a call, and really appreciate all the support we've received from the members on this call. It's really been a collaborative effort and really appreciate it.
I just
Okay,
have
Catherine,
one
thank you.
super quick comment.
Molly.
Oh, I was just going to say, not that anyone needs to be sold on this, but we recently rebranded and got a new logo for our organization. And at the beginning, I didn't really get it and didn't think it was important, but now I see it. And I think your presentation really helps make clear the importance of rebranding. So not that anyone needed to be sold on it, but it does make a difference.
Oh, I appreciate that, Molly. I think that is a good perspective. And even as I'm reading it, I'm like, I know a lot of these words sound like pie in the sky. It's hard to really understand until you go through the process. So I appreciate you guys trusting in us and then, hopefully getting excited about that final product. But it really does make a difference. So glad to hear that worked for you guys, Molly.
Yeah, and Catherine, thank you. Adding on to what Molly said, thanks for talking through what this process will be for us. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the recommendations that come about this, because I think this is something we can all kind of wrap around and be able to push forward and make it more well known. All of the work, and not even the work that this actual executive committee does necessarily, but the great committee work that we have that make a difference for people's lives here in Milwaukee. So thank you guys, both Catherine and Todd.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And you know what, that reminds me too. So, originally we did want to do a workshop in person, but again, understanding everyone's in a different space and just wanted to make it convenient, we will do it virtual. But please make sure to spend time with this survey because you guys have so much knowledge in your brains that we need. And we want to make sure you have a buy-in and feel comfortable with the direction we're moving in. So I know with surveys, it can be easy to kind of click through, but like we really need you guys, this core group, to share your thoughts, your honest feedback, because that will allow us to deliver better work. So when we deliver that survey, when we distribute that survey, I just ask that you do spend time thinking through it and really answering the questions. And if you want to provide additional detail, again, call Raphael, get our number. There will be room for open-ended questions, but please spend time and give that, the true input it does need. And you guys have so much of it. So I guess maybe thank you in advance for spending time taking that survey, because that will really help us. And I think, any other final thoughts or feedback?
Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. And we'll look forward to seeing the next round of results coming up here.
Excellent. Thank you all. Go Bucks. Have a great day. Maybe we'll see you at the parade tomorrow. I don't know. All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.